I've been following Adam on Facebook for, I guess, probably about 3 years now, I imagine. And then I got to meet him last summer when we went to plant stocks in North Carolina. And his story is so impactful. Dennis and I will never be the same after hearing it, and I don't think you will either. And now he works for Mastering Diabetes. So at the end, we're going to have a question and answer. So if you have any questions about diabetes, either for yourself or for someone you know.
How are you guys all doing? Thank you all for showing up tonight. That's really nice of you, especially I heard somebody drove 6 hours, which is like no pressure, right? So I'm going to start by telling you all my story. You could call it a journey from pills to plants. And it starts at the beginning. So I am a 7th generation Texan and a Jew. So that means I grew up eating burgers and barbecue and bagels and blintzes. So this is my dad, this is my mom, that's my twin brother Bobby, that's me, and that's my little sister Jewel. And growing up in the 80s in Texas was great. I had a lot of fun. I had an amazing childhood. I played sports. My dad taught me how to play baseball and basketball and football. My mom, with like the ease of her breath, inspired the most incredible imagination in me in my childhood. I had friends. I rode my bike to and from school every single day. It was an amazing childhood. But there were a few things that profoundly affected me growing up, and one was my relationship to food. Now, with all the best intentions in the world, I was criticized quite a lot for wanting to eat bad food, right? And for whatever reason, I just couldn't understand why, for whatever reason, was so easily avoided by the rest of the people in my family. They could just, with ease, avoid eating these foods all the time. But for me, it was like, I don't know what it was. I couldn't stay away from it. And I started to believe over the course of time that there must be something broken in me. There must be something inherently wrong with me because I cannot stop doing what my parents would not stop criticizing me for. And so I can remember as young as age 10, running into the kitchen when my parents were not around, grabbing food, running into my bedroom, closing the door, turning off the lights, and sitting in the corner and eating alone in the dark. And I did this for a reason. I did this because I was ashamed. I was ashamed and I was afraid. I was so scared that at any moment that door was going to open, the lights were going to come on, and my parents were going to see me for what I really was, this scared, broken child who was not deserving of their acceptance or their love. And that really frightened me. Growing up, I was so dependent upon knowing that I was accepted and loved by my parents. And I started to behave as a closet eater at about age 10. And at about the same time, I was taken to a doctor and I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. This was not an uncommon thing to have happening in the late 80s and early 90s. And this further instilled this belief in me that there's something wrong with me. There's something broken. Now I had a doctor. These were not the exact words of the doctor, but this is as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, this is what I hear coming from an authority figure. Adam, there's something about you that doesn't work right, that the rest of the world doesn't agree with. But we're going to put you on medication, and as long as you take this pill, no one's ever going to know. And from that point on, whenever I noticed something about myself that I didn't like, or I noticed something about myself that other people didn't like, or that the rest of the world didn't seem to agree with, I just looked for a substance outside of myself to hide whatever it was from the world, to fix what I thought was inherently broken in me. And we moved to Austin, Texas, right before I started high school, and I didn't have a lot of friends. I was slow to start puberty, and so I was kind of awkward. And at that time, Adderall was the new medication for ADHD. And Adderall is just a slightly stronger stimulant-based medication to treat ADHD. It's also used to treat narcolepsy. And I can remember, I think I was either a freshman or a sophomore, possibly the summer in between those years, when I got a call from a friend saying, "Hey, are you coming to the party tonight?" Well, sure, of course. Will you bring your Adderall with you? And now I didn't know Adderall could be used as a recreational drug. And so of course my response is, why? He goes, well, if you take a little bit more. If you take Adderall, you can stay up all night long. You have loads of energy, it's loads of fun. Will you please bring it? Like, you know, it'll be great. Everyone there's going to love it. And here I am. I didn't have a lot of friends. I felt awkward. I was shy because I didn't know anybody. And now I have an opportunity to be the person that everyone wants at the party. I get to be the person who is showing up and everyone is excited to see that he's there. So of course I brought it with me. And when people asked for it, of course I handed it over. And when they asked if I was going to do it, you bet I did. And I'm going to tell you guys, the first time I used Adderall as a recreational drug, man, this stuff fixed everything that was wrong with me. Right? I was a little bit overweight when I was a freshman and a sophomore. Guess what? Adderall is amphetamine. That's what this stuff is. It's medically pure amphetamine. When you take excess amphetamines, that's speed. That's what amphetamine is. You don't have a hunger drive. Your appetite is completely gone. Great, problem solved. I had loads of energy. I was the life of the party. Everything was immediately interesting, regardless of whether I actually cared about it or not. So whatever anyone else wanted to talk to me about, I was so excited to talk about it. I could make friends with ease. I had so much confidence. My dad and I were getting into constant fights about my study habits or really my lack thereof. But when I'm on a lot of Adderall, that's not a problem at all. I can study, I can sit down, I can hyper-focus on whatever it is I need to do. So my relationship with my dad starts to get better. This magic pill is magically fixing everything. So I started to need more. And that need for more became the most important concern in my life. The most important and overwhelming concern in my life. Every single day was these reoccurring questions of how much do I have left? How long will that last? Where will I get more? How much will that cost? Where am I going to get the money to pay for it? That was the reoccurring question and answer situation in my head at all times, every single day. And it became so overwhelming that I pretty soon stopped to care about what my parents were doing, what my friends were doing, what was going on with my classes, what was going on outside in the world. All of that just seemed to drift away as this need for this drug became so overwhelming that I dropped out of college. Now, I told my parents that I dropped out of college because I got a job in Austin in the field that I was studying, which is true, I did. But the real reason I decided to drop out of school was because I wanted to move back to Austin, where I knew the doctors that I could scam, and I knew the dealers that I could buy from. And I quickly developed a lifestyle as a criminal drug addict. I was buying and dealing and selling and all these things on the streets. I would scam anybody. I would do anything to you to get from you what I needed so I could get more drugs. I was doctor shopping. This is where you have multiple doctors prescribing the same medications without them knowing about each other. This is a felony. I was forging prescriptions, which is a felony. I was, the only time I would see my family was to either get money or things from them or to blame and shame them for every single thing that was wrong in my life. I started to isolate and I started to develop a dependency on fast food. There's a quote that nothing records the effects of a sad life so graphically as the human body. These photos, I was around 300 pounds at this time when these photos were taken. And when I say that I was struggling with dependency on fast food, I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. I would get up every single day and I would go to Torchy's Tacos, and I would get 4 of their potato, egg, and cheese breakfast tacos. Then for lunch, I'd go to McDonald's and get 2 supersized double quarter pounder meals, because one. Then I would go to Whataburger and get the honey barbecue chicken strip sandwich meal. For dinner, I would order an extra large pizza from Papa John's with a side of the chicken strips and the honey mustard dipping sauce. Then at about 3 in the morning, I would go back to Whataburger for 3 of the breakfast on a bun sandwich with sausage. I would drink about 15 sodas a day. And when I say I was struggling with substance abuse, the average prescription dosage for Adderall is between 5 and 30 milligrams a day. I was doing 450 milligrams in a 24-hour period. I would do this for 6 days straight without sleep, By the end of it, I would enter the stages of a drug-induced psychosis, where I would hear things that weren't happening, I would see things that weren't happening. It would be very hard for me to understand and know if I was actually saying the things I thought I was saying. It's very hard to describe the experience of being in a drug-induced psychosis. It is knowing that things are going on that you're completely not in control of in regards to how you act and respond to the world around you. It would get so bad that by the end of 6 days without sleep, the only way I could get myself to stop this process was to pop painkillers so I could make myself pass out. It was at this really miserable time in my life that my dad, who believed me, at this time in my life, I hated my dad. I hated my dad with every single ounce of my being. He made me so aware of everything that was wrong with me all the time just by being near me. But yet, here he comes and says, Adam, my dad has been a part of Whole Foods Market since the founding, and he says, you know what? Whole Foods Market has just partnered with this crazy plant-eating family called the Esselstyns, and they're going to offer this 7-day retreat for Whole Foods Market employees. And what they're going to do is they're going to have them learn about a plant-based diet, and hopefully they'll reverse their diseases, recapture their health. And we have some spots open, and I really want you to go. And I said yes, and I'm going to tell you guys why I said yes. The only reason why I said yes was because I knew if I did, I could get my dad to give me more money. I didn't care at all who Rip Esselstyn was. I didn't care who his dad was. I sure as heck didn't want to hear what he had to say. None of that was why I went. The only reason I went was because I knew if my dad thought I was taking him seriously, I could say, well, if I do this, I'm really going to need some support when I get back. Can you lend me more money so that I can really do this? That was my whole reason for doing it. I went to the immersion. I brought drugs with me. I was high every single day that I was there. In fact, I was so disruptive, not like I was yelling at people or anything like that, but my appearance, I was very diaphoretic, which is where you're very flush red and sweating all the time. I smelled incredibly toxic because the only things I would put into my body over the course of the last 5 years was fast food and drugs, so you can imagine what it smelled like to be near me. But I listened to everything that was being said. I went to every single lecture. I heard how if I would adopt a plant-based diet, that I could actually take charge of my health, take charge of my life. And it spoke to a very core value of mine, which is that I could be happy, healthy, and kind at the same time. That I could do no harm to other non-human animals on this planet. And as a person who grew up, thanks to my grandmother, very connected to nature, that spoke to me very, very profoundly. And I wish I could tell you all that that mattered to me then. I wish I could tell you that that was enough to get me to change. And in fact, the last night of the immersion, there was a speaker there named Dick Beardsley. And if you don't know who Dick Beardsley is, he was a marathoner in the 80s. He was one of the best marathoners of all time. He ran this incredible race against a man named Alberto Salazar, where they both ran, I think it was the Boston Marathon. They came in first and second and both broke the world records doing it. But he didn't talk about his marathon career. He talked about what happened afterward. He was working on his family farm, and he got caught up in machinery and he nearly died. And as a result of it, he got put on a lot of painkillers. And he became very dependent on these painkillers. And this dependency became really overwhelming. And he's telling a story about how he moved through the world suffering from substance abuse. And I'm sitting here listening going, man, you know what? If there's anybody in the world that I know that I could walk up to right now and say, I'm struggling with substance abuse, and I think I could die from it, and I need help, and know that they will not judge me for it at all, it's this person right here. Let this be the moment that I say for the first time ever out loud that I need help and I'm scared. And I can remember after he finished his presentation, he had a table set up, he was signing autographs for his book, and his wife was there, and I'm probably 15 feet away from him. And I'm like, all right, just walk up to him. Just walk up to this guy. Let's see what happens. And my feet are just, they're glued to the floor. I couldn't work up the courage to take another step. I said, okay, fine, wait till this is all over and he's standing by himself. Then just go up to him and say hi. Just start talking to him. Maybe if you just start a conversation, you'll work up the courage to say what you really want to say. And I didn't do it. I was too afraid. And what was really happening was I just was not ready to give up what was allowing me to escape a life that was too painful a place to be. And unfortunately, about 2 years later, this was 2012, I would come home from shopping at a store called Casual Male XL. It's the only place I could go where I could buy clothes with a 50-inch waist. And I would come home, and me going out in public was not a common thing at that point. I lived like a hoarder for the next couple of years. And I would notice that when I went out in public, I would look at other people looking at me. And I would imagine the things that they were thinking about me and saying about me. It's a profound thing to be that sick, and because people pay attention to you and ignore you at the same time. And I would come home and I would go into my bathroom and I'd take off my shirt and I'd stare at myself in the mirror. And I'd see this person that I didn't recognize as myself. I'd see all the rashes that had started to develop on my skin because I wasn't showering for months at a time. I'd see the stretch marks and I'd see this person, and I would just start saying to myself everything I believed these people were thinking about me. And as they did it, I would just beat myself as hard as I could, over and over and over again. And as I hit myself, I'd shout these things: "You're worthless. Look at you. I hate you." Everything I could say. I tried so hard to hate myself as much as I could to want to change my life. I believed that if I could just hate my life enough, that maybe I'd want to do something about it. And every single time I would do this, I'd end up falling on the floor, swollen red, crying, because no matter how much I hated myself, no matter how much I beat myself, it didn't make a difference. And I had a phone call with my brother where I told him, I said, I'm really struggling and I don't know what I'm going to do, but you're the most important person in the world to me. And I want you to know that no matter how bad things get, I'm never going to commit suicide, because I know that I don't want to live my life without you, and I don't want you to live your life without me. But unfortunately, on August 21st of 2012, in this apartment, I'm 30 years old, I already have erectile dysfunction. This wasn't a plan. I kept thinking to myself, you know what, this is never going to get any better. I could not for the life of me figure out how what was once the most incredibly successful thing I'd ever found in my life had become the most inescapable and overwhelming problem I've ever had. And I thought the only way out of it was to take myself out of the equation, and I attempted suicide by overdose. I remember the moment when I started to feel the overdose happening. I tried to stand up, my entire right side cramped, and everything starts to go black. And I remember thinking, this is the last thing you're ever going to see. It's very hard to explain the feeling of dying. But a few hours later, I wake up face forward in a puddle of my own vomit, in a pile of fast food garbage, a pile of empty Coke bottles, surrounded by nobody. Not because they didn't want to be there for me, but because I did everything in my power to make sure that they weren't there for me. And I had a very surreal moment where I realized that if I wasn't willing to radically change everything about the way that I moved through the world, my family, my mother and my father, my little sister Jewel, and my twin brother Bobby were going to spend every day of the rest of their lives asking themselves why I needed to eat and drug myself to death. And I told myself that maybe I don't love myself enough yet, but let me do one thing, and this next thing I'm going to do is for them. I picked up the phone, I called my parents, and as quickly as they answered, I said, I need help. And without judgment, without question, without any of that, well, you've been struggling with this stuff, and we've been trying to tell you, and all that, none of that. Just, Adam, that's all we want to do for you. And 2 weeks later, they helped me check myself into rehab. And even when you check yourself into rehab, it's not a comfortable thing to go through. The first 48 hours in the detox wing are, well, they're very uncomfortable. You're subjected to a lot of medical testing. You are strip searched. You have your bags searched. You're subjected to a lot of psychological evaluations and emotional evaluations. And of course, there's reasons for this. One, they want to make sure you're not trying to bring anything in with you. I was very, very high when I checked into rehab. I don't know if I could have checked in otherwise. They want to make sure that as a person who struggles with substance abuse, I lived a very high-risk life. Am I dealing with anything that I'm not aware of? And so I can remember it was about 72 hours, maybe a little bit longer than that I got a note from the doctor's office saying that they needed to talk to me. So here I come walking into the doctor's office all confident and shit, and I'm like, what's up? Like nothing could be wrong, right? And that day I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, erectile dysfunction, bipolar disorder, suicidal depression, anxiety disorder, sleep disorder, and attention deficit disorder. My blood pressure, when I checked in, was 210 over 110. My resting heart rate was 125. They were so concerned by these numbers that they made it mandatory that I have my blood pressure and heart rate checked every single morning and every single night of rehab. They were so concerned that I was going to have a heart attack during the detox period, and even more concerned that I would have a heart attack the rest of the time that I was there. And I felt utterly humiliated because, fortunately, I attended a week-long event with Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn and Dr. Michael Clapper and Doug Lyle, where they explained to me that these diseases are completely my fault. That I did this to myself. And I also had this idea that rehab was going to be 30 days of vacation from my drug use, and then I get to go home having it all under control again, and then I could just start using it recreationally. And now I had a very clear understanding that sobriety in and of itself was not a path to life for me. And I walked out of the doctor's office, I went back to my dorm room, I picked up the phone and I called my dad, and I told him I was leaving. And he said, Adam, what are you talking about? It hasn't even been a week. What's going on? Let's just talk about this. He could hear the fear in my voice. I said, I thought all I had to do here was get off the drugs. Now I found out I have heart disease, I have diabetes, I have all these psychological things that I can't understand. I don't know what they're talking about. I can't do this. I'm done. He said, Adam, let's just calm down for a second. I'm not saying you have heart disease or diabetes or any of that other stuff that you're talking about, but let's just consider for the moment that maybe you do. I'm not saying you do, but what if? Well, you learned that a lot of those things are reversible. You also learned how to reverse them. So if there's something about your life that you don't like and you can do something about it, then it isn't a problem. And if there's something about your life that you don't like and you can't do anything about it, it's not a problem. It's just the way things are. And maybe we can change the way you look at it so that it's not such a hindrance to how you move through the world. That conversation struck me in the most profound way I could ever have imagined. It helped me realize that if I'm the problem, I get to be the solution. And if that's the case, then there's no such thing as a problem. That I am in control of how I move through this world. I had to wait for nothing or no one to start making my life better. Unfortunately, in rehab, unless you tell them beforehand that you have dietary restrictions or whatever, they're not going to do that. The dietitian certainly didn't want to hear what I had to say. But it was recommended that I move into a sober living facility after my 37 days in rehab. And this is the actual sober living facility that I moved into. It's on the beach in Santa Monica, and I talked to the house manager, and they were telling me, oh yeah, you got healthy food, you're going to do great. And I walk in and I'm thinking, yes, this is it. This is where I own my health and well-being. This is where I'm going to do it. And then I looked in the kitchen. Guys, I took these photos there. This is the actual place. And I thought to myself, man, if I eat this way, I may leave sober, but I'll never leave healthier. And I walked up to the house manager, whose last name is literally Hamburger. And I said, Phil, I can't eat any of this stuff. And I'm trying to take charge of my health. I want to do this plant-based diet thing. I really need your help. And he said, Adam, you just tell me what you need to be successful. And so I told him what I wanted to do. And he got me some food, which was great. And I'd get up every single morning and I'd walk up to the pantry and I'd get immediately angry. And I'm going to tell you guys why. I would look and look, there's the oatmeal, and that's Fruity Pebbles. You guys, I love Fruity Pebbles. Fruity Pebbles was my jam growing up. And here's the thing, I like oatmeal. I liked it then. That's not the problem. My problem was I'm sitting here knowing what happens if I make each choice, I know exactly what will happen. If I choose the Fruity Pebbles, I know it will continue to fuel my disease in my body and I will not get healthy. I also know that if I choose the oatmeal, it's going to start to help me reverse these conditions, essentially recapture my life. So why in the world, knowing these things, would I sit there and still want the Fruity Pebbles? Why couldn't this just be a matter of intellect and will? Why could I not know what to do, want to do it, and that's it? End of story. Problem solved. What was this battle that was going on inside me? And then I remembered Doug Lyle gave a presentation at the retreat called The Pleasure Trap. So I went and got the book, because I knew it was about something about this type of thing. And what I learned is that there actually is a biological mechanism at play that compels us to continue to seek out behaviors that cause a greater dopamine response, a greater pleasure response, because pleasure is our body's way of letting us know we've done something biologically beneficial for us. Unfortunately, our bodies did not evolve from the modern environment, so it can't interpret modern food and modern behaviors properly. So when I ate Fruity Pebbles, or when I popped 125 milligrams of Adderall at a time, my body responded by going, "Bravo, man! I don't know what that was, never seen anything like it before, but that's got to be the best thing you've ever done for yourself. Anytime you have an opportunity to do that, you do it again. Because a pleasure response like that is so rare, there must not be a lot of it in nature. You keep doing that." Once I understood this, I felt all this shame lifted from me. Because I realized when I'm sitting there knowing what happens if I choose each choice, and still wanting to choose what I knew was bad for me, wasn't because there was anything wrong with me, wasn't because I was broken, it's because my body was doing exactly what it was supposed to. My body was responding exactly the way it was supposed to, given the environment that I created for myself. I also learned that if I was just willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and choose the oatmeal long enough, eventually it wouldn't be a chore. And if I could just be comfortable being comfortable long enough, eventually I would get up and I would look forward to the oatmeal and there wouldn't be a battle anymore. I would get up and want to choose the oats. And I had to decide, all right, fine. I'm willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable, but why am I willing to do this? And you all have probably heard, like, define your why, that whole thing. And from the outside looking in, someone would say, "Oh, I get it. He's obese. He has heart disease. He has diabetes, and he nearly died from substance abuse. Those are his whys." It's true that those things were occurring, but as a motivation, that couldn't be further from the truth. Yeah, I was obese, and I didn't want to be. I had diabetes and heart disease, and you bet I did not want diabetes or heart disease. And I nearly died from substance abuse, and I'm going to tell you guys, I didn't want to die. Why not? What was it about my life that I loved enough that I was willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable? Not what was it about my life that I hate enough. I remember I told you guys, I tried for the longest time to hate my way out of that situation, and I don't think people can. I don't think we hate our way out of bad situations. I think we have to love ourselves into positive ones. I told myself I was going to stop focusing on what was the matter with me and start focusing on what matters to me. And for me, I wanted to be the most authentic version of myself so that I could be with the people I loved and just be with them. And in order to do that, I had to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I would get up every single day and I would prepare a meal on a plate that was about health and wellness, that was about me becoming a healthier version of myself today than I was the day before. And I saw these actions as acts of self-care and self-love. I saw them as affirmations of recovery. And within 3 months, my blood glucose, my fasting blood glucose, dropped from 390 to 80. And I just stopped taking the medication. I don't recommend anybody do that. Talk to your doctor first. And I go to see my endocrinologist at month 4. And we had done some blood work after 3 months. They're going to retest my A1C, which is a biomarker for diabetes. And I go into the meeting with the doctor and he sits down and he opens my file and he goes, "Adam, according to your A1C, you are no longer diabetic." And then I stood up and said, "Then I no longer need your services." And I felt something that I hadn't felt in a long time. Self-worth. And that self-worth made me feel like I was worth saving. These last 3 months have taught me that discipline is simply choosing between what you want now and what you want most. And what I wanted most was to recapture that experience of being alive and be there for the people that matter most to me, to reconnect to what was truly meaningful in life. I'm not telling you guys that I didn't have temptations or urges or cravings, or that I didn't get angry or frustrated or mad or scared. I'm telling you, I decided I was going to build a life where I experienced those things and I was okay with it. Because anger, anxiety, fear, these are human emotions. They are part of the breadth of the human experience. In fact, in a lot of cases, anxiety, fear, and sadness are some of the sanest responses our bodies can have, given how we're living our lives. I wanted to let myself have the space and compassion to experience these things without judgment, to recognize them for what they were, a highly evolved signal that was trying to tell me something incredibly meaningful about how I'm living my life and how I'm moving through the world. And that if I continued to resist and fight these feelings and fight these situations instead of move through them, I would never learn how to best move through this world as my authentic self. I'm going to tell you guys right now, feeling is probably the most human thing any of us do. It's the one thing that I know for a fact that I have in common with every single person here. At the end of the day, we've all felt. We do not feel because we're broken. We feel because we're whole. It is part of being human to feel, and I was going to allow myself to do it every single day without judgment. And in doing so, I really began to learn self-acceptance. I really began to build this mindful practice, this practice of mindfulness, of being okay with being upset, being frustrated, being tempted by other food sources and saying, it's okay. I get why I'm feeling like this. It's reasonable for me at 3 months sober to still have urges and temptations for drug use. It's okay at 3 months of just adopting a plant-based diet to still have cravings for, tacos and burgers. I'm going to let this happen, let it pass through me, breathe, and then respond in a way that still brings positivity into my life. Within 10 months, I had lost over 100 pounds, and within a year, I was off of every single medication I was put on in rehab, including the antidepressants, the mood stabilizers, the sleeping medications, the anxiety medications, and the ADHD medications. As of today, I've lost 200 pounds, and I truly feel at this moment that I'm closest to the most authentic version of myself that I've ever been. And I am here today as the person I am today, and this person I am today is the person I've always been. Recovery and lifestyle change is not about becoming somebody new. It's about becoming the most authentic version of the person that we've always been. It is the knowledge that I am now and at every point in my life always been everything I've ever needed to be. I've always been enough. If I wasn't everything I've ever needed to be, I could never have changed anything. And that's why change is possible for everyone. We don't have to wait to become the person we need to be. We are always that person. And it is the understanding of that that allows us to make change. There are a few people, though, who definitely and without a doubt profoundly impacted my ability to take ownership of my life. And the first person is Rip Esselstyn. Rip has become a very dear friend of mine. He's mentored my career. I've worked with him for the last 5 years. And when I first met Rip, I was in survival mode. I did anything I could, put any toxic substance, food or drugs into my body to numb myself up and escape life. My life was too painful a place to be to show up and be present for as my authentic self. And I would do anything to escape it, and that's what drugs and food did for me. But what Rip taught me was how to stop surviving my day and start living my day. When I'm able to live my day, my life is a beautiful thing. And it's very much because of some of the lessons that I learned from Rip Esselstyn. This is my mom and my dad. There was a time in my life when I used to sit in my apartment alone in the dark saying, Adam, you're a college dropout. You're addicted to drugs and addicted to fast food, and you're about a month from being homeless. You got nothing going for you. But at least when your parents die, you're going to get their money. It's shocking to me even to realize that I actually thought those things and yet to love them at the same time. But it's that kind of thinking that drove me to hate myself on a daily basis, which compelled me to use drugs and food on a daily basis, which made me hate myself even more. It was this vicious cycle of self-hatred and psychosis. But regardless of how poorly I treated them, my parents never gave up on me. They never gave up believing that if I wanted to, I could completely recapture my life. This photo is a photo taken by my mom as she and my dad walked me into rehab. And this photo was taken by my mom as she watched my dad and I run the race in Austin 3 years later. Because they literally walked every single step of this journey with me. They're my best friends. I get to work with my dad, and I love them very much. I talked about my brother earlier. Come on, right? This is my brother in 2016. He was about 280, 290 pounds. He had diabetes. He was incredibly depressed. He's a brilliant filmmaker. He actually won the Emerging Filmmaker Award at the National Geographic Film Festival. He's an environmental filmmaker. And I came to him and I said, Bobby, can I give you a gift? It's because of how much I love who you are as a person that I want to ask you if you'd be willing to come and live with me for 6 months in Santa Monica. That this actually is only about your behavior and not who you are as a person. I know we can reverse the diabetes. Let's just see what happens. You don't have to do this for the rest of your life, but let's just try this. Let's try 30 days. Just commit to moving to LA for 6 months. We'll do 30 days. At the end of the 30 days you want to do it, that's fine. But let's give it a shot. He agreed. On January 4th, we met with Dr. Matt Letterman, who is the young doctor from Forks Over Knives. And he did all the biometric workup. And Matt and I had a talk, and I told him exactly what we're going to be doing. I said, look, he's going to be eating everything. Everything he eats is going to be prepared in my kitchen, at my house, and he's not going to eat anything without me. And Matt Letterman asked Bobby if he brought his diabetes medication. To completely healthy range without medication in 6 weeks. This was him after he lost his 50 pounds in 3 months, which is faster than me. It's fine, he can have that. Sorry, that's okay. And these are great, because this is just a before and after. He's lost about 100 pounds as of now. But if you really want to see my brother, this is my brother. He's become quite a voice in the animal rights movement. He goes to slaughterhouses. I think he's rescued 10 animals from slaughterhouse trucks. He's working with the filmmaker Sean Munson, who directed the film Earthlings. My brother is a producer and cinematographer on the follow-up film. There's a great quote in the beginning of the film Earthlings, and it comes from King Lear. Has anyone ever read King Lear? King Lear is talking to the blind Earl of Gloucester, and he asks him, how do you see the world? And the blind Earl replies, I see it feelingly. And that's how my brother sees the world. And knowing this, he goes into slaughterhouses, he sees some of the worst things I could ever imagine, and a person who's so deeply connected to animals and non-human animals, I just have the most incredible respect for him. And it's been quite a thing to watch the light come back in his eyes and watch him recapture his life. But no moment will ever come close to the moment when he and I got back. We went and lived in Nepal for 6 months. We lived in an orphanage. And afterwards he walked up to me and he goes, my brother is very much a Renaissance man. He's a poet, he's a filmmaker, he's a boxer. He does all these really incredible things. He's brilliant. And he comes to me and he says, Adam, Joseph Campbell says, people are not so much looking for the meaning of life as much as they are the experience of being alive. And that's what you've given back to me. And it was at that moment that I realized that I had achieved the goal that I set for myself when I checked into rehab, which was to be my authentic self. Because by simply being with my brother, giving him me and asking nothing in return, I watched my brother completely recapture his experience of being alive. And that is the most incredible gift that I will ever be able to give anybody. And I love him so much. I'm so proud of everything he does. I'm going to tell you that I've learned a few things in the last 7 years. I'll have 7 years sober in October. First is I am not now, nor have I ever been broken. You guys want to know why I weighed 350 pounds, had type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and suffered so badly from substance abuse that I tried to end my own life? Because that's exactly what's supposed to happen. When you consume 5,000 calories of fast food a day and consume copious amounts of substances because you just completely ignore yourself on a daily basis. There's never been anything wrong with me. My body was doing exactly what it was supposed to. The reason why I was able to do everything I've done is because my body is doing exactly what it's supposed to once I changed my environment and how I move through the world. I've only ever had 2 problems in life. I didn't know how to live as a healthy emotional or physical person. Everything else was a result of those 2 things. Once I accepted that I don't know how to live as a healthy emotional or physical person, and then accepted that I also don't know any other way to do it, I was finally willing to say, that's fine. I don't know what I'm doing. I also don't know anything else to do. I was able and willing to break open and listen to anybody in front of me who was willing to help. I was going to listen to what they had to say. I was going to try it. If it worked and I found joy in doing it, I kept it. If it didn't, I found something else that was in alignment with what I was trying to achieve. Once I stopped trying to be right all the time, I was able to learn more about myself than I've ever learned in my entire life. The last thing is gratitude. I start and end my day every single day with gratitude. I'm grateful for everything I've gone through. I'm grateful for the obesity, the disease, the suicide attempt, all of it. Because every single one of those things has allowed me to realize what an incredible gift life is. What an amazing thing it is to allow myself to be connected with other people, to willingly say, you can see me, and if you let me, I'll see you. That's an incredible thing. And I would have missed out on so much, and I'm so grateful for every single day of my life. And I'm going to tell you maybe the most profound thing I've learned is that the simplest change on your fork can make the most profound change of your life. I know it has for me. I know it can for anybody here. You guys want to know why I get up every single day and eat a plant-based diet? Because I want to. That's it. That's the X factor. I found a reason in my life that I loved enough to be willing to get up and want to do it again. I'm not like a celebrity. I didn't have personal trainers or anything like that. I didn't even start working out until a year after I lost the weight. I just want to. If you want to, you can do it. And I never made a commitment to myself that I was going to do this for the rest of my life. I had 37 days sober. I couldn't see 2 weeks down the road, let alone the rest of my life. I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this for 7 days. And at the end of those 7 days, what worked, I'm going to keep. What didn't, I'm going to change. I look at it like running a race. So I love running marathons now. And I'm going to tell you, when I start a marathon, I can't see the finish line. And I never need to see it to get there. The only thing I can do is focus on the road in front of me, my place, my step, and my breath. If I continue to do that and fall in love with that process, I will reach any finish line I run towards. And the same thing with life. Sure, losing the weight and reversing the disease is great. But I was only able to do that because I fell in love with the process. I fell in love with the act of putting these plants on my plate, with moving my body with purpose, and with the practice of mindfulness. Once that happened, everything else took care of itself. Every single person here has the opportunity to do that. I now work as a diabetes and food addiction coach with Mastering Diabetes, which has just been amazing because these guys are all my best friends. I've been friends with them for years, and you guys maybe recognize this guy, Mark Ramirez from Eating You Alive. And Cyrus was in Diet Fiction, and so is Robbie as well. We help people reverse insulin resistance through the use of low-fat, whole food, plant-based nutrition. But the thing I'm most excited about is I'm spearheading a research study this year. I founded a nonprofit called Plant-Based for Positive Change, and we're doing the first ever randomized controlled trial to test the effectiveness of nutrient-dense diets in early addiction recovery. And what's amazing is that when we were designing the study protocol, you look at the outcome that you're researching, or that you're studying, and then you look to previous research that's seen as the gold standard for that outcome, and you say, all right, this is what we have to judge our outcomes against. There's never been a study on any diet in early addiction recovery. This will be the first one ever done in history. We're incredibly excited about it. I have Drs. Dean and Aisha Sherazai, who wrote the Alzheimer's Solution. They're probably the world's leading brain specialists and brain health specialists. They're on my research team. And Tara Kemp at Northern Arizona University. And it's going to be quite credible. We're running the study in Austin, Texas in August. But thank you all so much for letting me share my story. I would love to talk about insulin resistance. I'm super passionate about it. So if anybody would like to talk to me or has any questions right now, I'd love to answer them. And I can give you guys a really great and brief understanding of insulin resistance if you'd like.
Definitely want to hear that.
Okay, you guys want to hear about insulin resistance? Has anyone here ever heard of insulin resistance?
Yes.
Great, awesome. Okay, I'm going to ask you one question. Who here, or it's two questions, who here thinks diabetes is caused by sugar? Raise your hand. Okay, that's cool, right? Who here thinks diabetes is caused by fat? All right. So actually, the answer is fat, and I'm going to explain why. Insulin resistance is the fuel that creates prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and it also affects the quality of life of those living with insulin-dependent autoimmune diabetes like type 1 and type 1.5. Let me explain to you how this works. Insulin resistance is defined by the storage of fat in tissue that is not designed to store fat. I'm going to break this down how this happens really easily. When a person consumes a diet that is high in dietary fat, essentially 40% of your calories from dietary fat or greater, what happens is some of that fat is burned as energy. Some of it is stored in our adipose tissue. And our adipose tissue is all over our bodies. It's our body fat. And what's great about adipose tissue is that it's actually a protective layer that stops fatty acids from making their way into tissue that is not designed to store large amounts of fatty acid. So any excess fat that doesn't make it into the adipose tissue gets stored in that tissue that is not designed to store fat. And when we're talking about diabetes, we're talking about muscle and liver cells. So to be technical, we're talking about something called intramyocellular lipids. And that's just a big fancy word for intra, within, myo, muscle, cellular, cell, and lipids, fat. Fat in muscle cells. You can see this on MRIs. And in your liver cells, it's something called intrahepatocellular lipids, which just means fat in the liver cells. And our liver and muscle cells can handle small amounts of fatty acids, but they can't handle a lot. And more fatty acids that come in, they form these things called lipid droplets. And these lipid droplets form, and when enough of them are there, they essentially tell the insulin receptors of your muscle cells in your liver, stop communicating with insulin. We're done. We have too much fat in here. This is a problem. We can't let any other energy source into this cell unless we're able to burn this off. So now this person is quite insulin resistant, goes and eats something like a banana or a mango or a sweet potato, something incredibly healthy, high in carbohydrate, low in dietary fat, full of water and fiber and minerals and antioxidants and vitamins. And what happens is it's broken down in the digestive system and most of it becomes glucose, which is blood sugar. The glucose enters the bloodstream and your beta cells of your pancreas, your pancreatic beta cells, these are the cells that produce insulin, sense the glucose in the blood and they release insulin into your bloodstream. And insulin's job is to convey that glucose from your bloodstream into your muscle cells to be used as energy. Fuel your muscles, fuel your brain, fuel your body. So insulin comes along, grabs this glucose molecule, walks up to the cell, knocks on the door and says, hey, I got some glucose for you. I know it's your preferred fuel source. I know you love this stuff. Do you want to take it up? And the muscle cell says, are you freaking kidding me? Do you see how much dietary fat we have stored in here? Do you see the size of these lipid droplets? Do you think I could literally let you in right now? No. You're going to have to stay in the bloodstream. I can't even talk to you. I've been told that I'm not allowed to talk to you until this is taken care of. You stay in the bloodstream. I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you until this is taken care of. So this person's glucose builds up and up and up in their bloodstream. And over the course of time, their blood glucose rises to a level that is diabetic. And they're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. Not because of the carbohydrate, because of the dietary fat. So how do we reverse this? Well, it's actually quite simple. You go on a diet, a low-fat, whole food, plant-based diet, where you try to make sure that your dietary fat consumption is 15% or less of your calories per day coming from dietary fat. When you do this, there's no more fatty acids making their way into these muscle and liver cells, and the body goes, oh, thank goodness. We can finally start to burn some of these things off. The mitochondria in your cells, which is basically your fuel-burning factory, says, thank you so much, I've been waiting for this moment. They start burning up these lipid droplets. They start using it up and up and up, and then finally your cell goes, hey, guess what? Insulin receptor, Go ahead, do your job again. Go ahead. This person eats a banana. All of a sudden, the glucose enters the blood. Insulin comes and grabs it, knocks on the door, and says, "You want some more? I know we haven't been talking in a while, but you think maybe today?" Absolutely. I've been waiting for you to come back. I finally got room. Let's come on in. This person's blood glucose starts to drop. Their A1C comes down. Their insulin resistance is reversed. And I'm going to tell you why that's important. Because typically, a person becomes diabetic, they go to an endocrinologist, and they're told to go on a diet, a low carbohydrate diet. Let me explain to you why this is a problem. Because people will adopt a low carbohydrate, whether it's paleo or ketogenic diet, and guess what? Their blood glucose levels come down. Their A1C comes down. Simply because they are not consuming carbohydrate. In fact, their insulin resistance is climbing. So you might be saying to yourself, well, so what? I mean, their A1C is down, their blood glucose level is down, well, who cares if they're insulin resistant? At least their numbers look good. Well, insulin resistance is the fueling force behind heart disease, diabetes, cancer, kidney failure, liver disease, blindness, Alzheimer's, and dementia. Increases in insulin resistance is directly related to an increase in something called all-cause mortality. And that means essentially death from any cause. And obviously we're talking about health-related causes. The greater your insulin resistance, the greater your risk of dying from any health-related disease. So yes, this person has lowered their A1C, they've lowered their blood glucose levels, but only because they've stopped consuming carbohydrate. And I'm going to tell you guys, diabetes is a dysfunction where the body cannot metabolize glucose. Unless you're consuming carbohydrate, and your body is demonstrating that it can handle that carbohydrate, you cannot claim you've reversed diabetes. So that is essentially insulin resistance in a nutshell, and why eating these foods that you guys are eating here today, and making sure that you're eating a low-fat plant-based diet, is the perfect answer for solving this problem. It has very little to do with your genetics. So let's look at me, for example. I build intramyocellular lipids like a champ. Like, if I start eating McDonald's, I guarantee you in a year I'll probably be diabetic again. I have some kind of genetic predisposition that allows me to build these intramyocellular lipids faster than the person next to me. That's true, but that only occurs when I give my body what it needs to do so. If I do not consume high amounts of dietary fat, regardless of my genetic predisposition, I never would have ever become diabetic. Your genetics play about a 2% role in your disease causation risk. 98% of that risk is your lifestyle. And every single person here is in control of that, which makes all of us in control of our health and well-being for the rest of our lives. Does anyone have any questions? About anything at school. We could even talk about sports.
There is a lady here that had some questions about carbs and Dr. McDougall's diet.
Sure.
There she is.
Hi.
Yeah, I just recently got on their McDougall site, and yeah, there was a lot of carbs.
Yeah.
I haven't taken diabetes medicine or insulin or anything in about a year and a half, 3 years.
Fantastic.
But, you know, I was worried about my A1C going up. I was worried about just, you know, I'm on statins
Okay.
and stuff like that still. But,
Yeah.
you know, everything going up for carbs.
Sure. So let me ask you a question. When you say carbs, what do you mean?
Potatoes.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, so whole intact carbohydrate is actually the healthiest fuel source for humans. Whole intact carbohydrate does not cause diabetes, does not cause heart disease. It actually lowers your risk of this and is actually the fuel source to reverse and prevent it further. This is the right thing to be doing for yourself. Let me ask you though, you say you haven't been taking your diabetes medication in a while. Why?
Well, because I went on a plant-based diet. And I've lost like about 65, 70 pounds.
That's fantastic.
Still have 40 to go, but
Sure.
my A1C is around 5.7.
Great.
Lower than that. So
When was the last time it was tested?
It was tested probably about 2 months ago.
Okay,
They
so-
test me every 3 months.
And how long ago did you start the diet? 2 years. And what was your A1C when you were first diagnosed?
It was extremely high.
Okay.
I can't even, it was like, it was way up there, like 13.
Okay, yeah, that's what mine was.
Yeah, it was really bad.
So I'm
It was
gonna.
like 300.
So you're answering your own question. Okay. So you went on. Yeah.
We're kind of shy away, you know.
That's fine. I get it. Like I get people have a fear of carbohydrate. We've been taught this lie that carbohydrates are all the same, whether they're processed and refined or they come from a potato. But a potato is the perfect food for reversing diabetes. I mean, it's 2% fat, 95% whole intact carbohydrate. It has an abundance of minerals and vitamins and antioxidants and water and fiber and yes, protein, but I don't even want to say that word. That is the perfect food for reversing insulin resistance. If you're worried about weight gain, it's never going to happen. In fact, whole intact carbohydrate cannot be converted to fat. If you're eating foods, your body is not going to blow apart a glucose ring, start stringing together all these molecules to make fatty acid chains when the foods themselves have essential fatty acids. Your body's not going to say, hang on a second, you guys wait over there, let me do all this work to blow apart these molecules and reconstitute it into fatty acids. That's not going to happen. It will happen with processed, refined sugars like white table sugar. That's going to set off inflammation. It's going to create a whole host of problems. But that's not going to happen if you're eating whole intact carbohydrate. Your body doesn't store it that way. It stores it as glycogen. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Follow us at Mastering Diabetes. Oh, yeah.
This isn't really a question, but it's something that because we all hear from us all being plant-based, we all hear about people on keto diets and keto diets and stuff like that. Can you kind of explain the problems with those?
Sure.
And give people some things that they can say to their friends that are obvious when they're saying, oh, well, it's working for me and all that. Can you kind of did that a little bit?
Sure.
What some of the other problems?
Yeah, there's some serious misconceptions about the ketogenic diet. I could go into like the nutritional biochemistry of it all, but like I just want to make it easy on everybody here. Here's the thing: people are going to go on ketogenic diets. They're going to eat a diet, and a true ketogenic diet is a diet of 80% of their calories coming from fat, 5% from carbohydrate, and 15% from protein. Most people are not actually on a ketogenic diet. They're on a high-fat and high-protein diet, and that's a real problem. Because when the body becomes starved for glucose, the liver will convert excess protein to glucose in a process called gluconeogenesis. It actually destroys liver function. But here's the thing. People go on this ketogenic diet, and what happens, their numbers start coming down, their lipids start to look great, so their cholesterol levels come down, their triglyceride levels come down, their blood glucose levels come down, they start losing weight in the short term. There is not a single long-term health study that shows any benefit of a ketogenic diet. In fact, it is a 56% increase in all-cause mortality. And that is coming from Dr. Kim Williams, who is the former president of the American College of Cardiology. The problem is really, you can do a plant-based ketogenic diet, and ketosis is an okay thing to be in for like a couple days, a month, but it is not a state that you want to be in chronically. It will really do a number on your system, create widespread massive inflammation. The problem is people are mostly doing these animal-based ketogenic diets. And there's a lot of things that come from animal-based foods that are really, really destructive to your overall health. When we talk about meat, eggs, and dairy, we're talking about a few specific things. We're talking about the sulfur-containing amino acids that are found in animal proteins. Sulfur-containing amino acids set off a condition called acidosis. Metabolic acidosis is a chronic systemic inflammatory response. The entire body becomes inflamed, and this is a real problem because inflamed tissues release these molecules called cytokines. And inflammatory cytokines do a whole number to your system. You really don't want to have this situation happening. There's also something called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, and this is a growth hormone that all of our bodies produce IGF-1, and IGF-1 is made to regulate the growth of tissue in our bodies, and our bodies are doing everything they can to slow down the rate of growth in our bodies. And once we're past that greatest period of growth that we ever go through, like toddler to young adult, The only way we consume excess IGF-1 is by consuming the IGF-1 of other animals. When we do this, increased levels of IGF-1 are directly linked to cancer and tumor cell growth. This is clearly defined in peer-reviewed research. We know this for a fact, that when you reduce your intake of IGF-1, cancer cell growth drops. When you add back in the exact amount of IGF-1 that was removed from that person's diet, their cancer cell growth goes back up. So we know that this is a problem. Then you have something called heme iron. So the iron that's found in animals is something called heme iron. It's an iron mineral that's attached to a hemoglobin molecule. This is a very, very unfriendly molecule. What it does is it sets off massive inflammation throughout the vasculature. If you were to look at a heme iron molecule in under a microscope, it has these very, very jagged edges. And when they rub up against the walls of the arteries, they set off massive inflammation. The other is something called TMAO. So when you're eating foods that have carnitine, you have bacteria in your gut that feed off of this carnitine. And when these gut bacteria feed off of carnitine comes from muscle tissue. They produce a molecule called trimethylamines. And trimethylamines are produced by this carnitine-eating bacteria in your gut, and that trimethylamine is then processed in the liver into something called trimethylamine oxide. It's oxidized in the liver, the oxygen molecule connects to it. Trimethylamine oxide is literally it's a molecule from hell, guys. This stuff literally drives cholesterol into the artery walls. You do not want to have TMAO production going on in your system. Here's the amazing thing. When you stop eating meat, you no longer feed the bacteria that eat carnitine. Guess what happens? It dies. So you no longer have these TMAO producing bacteria in your gut. And they've done some really cool things where they've taken people, they put them on a plant-based diet for 6 months, and they feed them a piece of meat. And then they measure the amount of TMAO produced from this one meal. And guess what? There's none. Because the bacteria no longer exists in their gut. Now, if they were to continue to eat that, it would come back. You would start feeding the small remnants of that bacteria that exist in your gut. It would start to overpopulate, it would take over, and yes, of course, this would continue to happen. But TMAO is only produced in the guts of people who consume meat, eggs, and dairy on a regular basis. So, not only that, the biocontaminants and pesticides that are found in animals are always much higher than what you find in plants. Why? Because not only are the animals usually contaminated by pesticides, but they eat the produce that is grown with pesticides. And typically, the GMO produce that is produced in this country, the corn and the soy products, that's all fed to livestock. So you are getting a highly contaminated, biocontaminated source of food. There's just really no reason for it. There's no human need for it. There's not a single health condition on the planet that is improved by the introduction of meat, eggs, and dairy. So whether you're doing a ketogenic diet, whether you're doing a paleo diet, it's really irrelevant because the food sources that they're using to create this diet end up causing harm to your body every single day. So we could talk about the specific effects of a ketogenic diet, which I would say is probably the worst, given that it is the best diet to create insulin resistance that you could possibly design. But it's kind of irrelevant anyways. Any introduction of animal products as the majority or a significant source of calories in the person's diet is not going to be a good thing for your overall health outcome.
Very well explained, everything.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, hi.
My husband and I like mushrooms.
Yeah.
And from what we're kind of new to this.
Sure.
And I don't really see recipes for mushrooms. We use it as a meat substitute
Okay.
a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you feel about
Well,
mushrooms in the diet.
No, they're great. Absolutely. Mushrooms are incredibly beneficial. We really just in the last 5 years started to really understand the true nutritional benefits of mushrooms. Eat them all. You know what the best recipe for mushrooms is? What's your favorite recipe? Ever?
Well, fried mushrooms, but fried.
Okay, so but not a mushroom recipe. What's your favorite recipe other than that?
He likes the stuffed mushrooms. I stuff them with
But not one that has mushrooms in it.
without mushrooms.
Yeah, what's your favorite recipe?
Oh, I guess Mexican food.
Yeah, put some mushrooms on it.
Yeah.
It's the best way to get it in your diet. Just put it on stuff.
Sandwiches and everything.
Exactly, yeah.
For those of you who ate the taco salad, my taco meat is made with ground up mushrooms.
There you go.
Mixed with cauliflower, and mixed with either walnuts or chickpeas tonight.
There you go.
You can use mushrooms all kinds of ways.
Mushrooms are really amazing foods. In fact, you know, we talk about, everyone here has probably heard about the fact that plant-based diets don't contain B12. Well, mushrooms happen to be one of the few plants that do absorb B12, but I'm not saying that this is something you should eat to get an adequate amount of B12. In fact, no B12 originates in any food source. So I want to clear this up really, really quickly for you guys. People that say you have to eat meat to get B12 is nonsense. Meat is not where B12 originates. B12 comes from microorganisms in the soil. And unfortunately, due to modern agriculture practices, we have killed the health of the soil. There's not a lot of these microorganisms in the soil. And then because we have to triple wash anything that comes to a grocery store because of cross-contamination possibility, any excess microorganisms are washed off. In fact, the modern livestock industry has to inject their animals with B12 because the animals are not getting enough B12 from the soil that they're eating. The average American, no matter what their diet, is B12 deficient. Simply take a methyl B12, it's called methylcobalamin, methyl B12 supplement. All you need is 2,000 to 3,000 micrograms per week. I take one. I have a bottle of B12. It's 2,000 micrograms per lozenge. I take one a week. The entire bottle lasts me the year. Super easy. The other vitamin is D3. It comes from the sun. It's our sunshine vitamin. If you want, simply just, because, I mean, you guys can look at me, I'm pretty pale, but most Americans, because we're now no longer earth connected as we used to be, we spend so much time indoors, no one really gets adequate sun exposure, simply take a D3 supplement, 2,000 international units per day, you're fine. You really don't have to worry about deficiencies of any vitamin or mineral nutrient source unless you get a blood work done and it shows deficiency. Other than that, don't worry about it. Okay, yeah. B12 is once a week. 3,000 so much.